I'm currently attending college, studying. I recently returned home for a family matter. But let me step back a bit. During my final year of secondary school, I was in the library during a supervised study period, engaged in some coding tasks on a computer. As my home laptop didn't have the necessary coding environment installed. Anyway, a boy who shared my class took the workstation adjacent to mine, as these particular machines were the only ones equipped with the required software. He was a lanky, rather pale individual. He had dark, shaggy hair that obscured one of his eyes. He wore a band shirt, a worn denim vest, and scuffed combat boots. He never spoke to anyone during lessons, and I'd never seen him associated with anyone else. So I took my seat, and he glanced up, his expression conveying profound irritation, as if I had just committed some grave offense. I quickly averted my gaze and started fumbling through my pack to seem busy as a diversion. With my head down, I heard him chuckle and then mutter, "Of course." I froze, my head still bowed towards my bag. I simply chalked it up to the frustrations often encountered with programming, deciding he was talking to the machine. I sat upright again and hastily entered my credentials, seeking to diffuse the tension. To break the awkwardness, I commented, "The instructor really piles on the assignments. It's tough to keep up." His gaze remained fixed on the display. He said, "You want the solutions, don't you?" I laughed and replied, "No thanks, I wouldn't learn anything that way." Ordinarily, I might have accepted, but I didn't want to experience that unsettling gaze again. It seemed to peer right through me. He let out that unsettling chuckle once more, so creepy that I felt compelled to close my eyes and wince. I opened them and looked over only to see he was gone. The peculiar thing was he had left his portable drive behind. I waited for about a quarter hour to see if he might return, but he didn't. The study period concluded at 1 p.m., and it was then 12:50. I decided I would take it and give it back to him the following day in our programming class. I stashed it in a small container on a shelf over my sleeping area. I must admit it was a cool drive. It had a unique design resembling a miniature key with the data storage in the center. Here's the odd part. After that day, he never attended school again. He was known for frequently missing class, so for the initial month no one paid it much mind. However, when late spring arrived and we were all preparing for graduation, I had completely forgotten about the portable drive until a couple of days back when I came home. I needed one and recalled I still possessed that boy's. I ran a check with my virus scanner and it indicated it was entirely safe. Naturally, I intended to erase everything on it so I could put my presentation for a general subject course on it. Instead, however, I started exploring the data stored on it. The first thing I saw was a directory labeled Programming Solutions. I opened it and it contained solutions for all the coursework. I thought, well, maybe that's why he left it, so I could copy from him, perhaps because he knew he wasn't coming back. I went back and another folder held audio tracks. I felt compelled to open that one to see what kind of sound he listened to. Contrary to what one might assume, there were only 3 songs, something moody, something psychedelic, and a track by a classic rock band known for chaos. I went back again. There was a folder without a designation. Inside it was something labeled Advanced Literature. There were numerous papers and miscellaneous items. There was one called untitled manuscript. I opened it, and it was simply a multi-page file composed of scanned handwritten notes covering several pages of lined paper, filled entirely with repetitions of his surname. I went back again. This is the point where things turned strange. He had taken images of the evacuation diagrams displayed on the door in every classroom. There was a picture of a discarded cigarette butt on the lavatory tiles and another image of spare change scattered on the restroom floor with a small note attached, proclaiming petty cash in block capitals. Now, here's the truly peculiar part. There was a photograph featuring me, captured as I was engrossed in reading in a class. From the look of it, it was a different subject, one he wasn't enrolled in. There was also a file named Final Thoughts, but it contained no information when I opened it. I still remain unsure if this was some sort of prank or not. For all I know, he never showed up again simply because he realized he had misplaced his portable storage device. An event from several years ago involved myself and a friend I'll refer to as Sarah. We're currently in our mid-teens, meaning we were in our early teens, perhaps 12 or 13, when this happened. Sarah and I have been acquainted since early elementary school, and we were inseparable, spending most weekends and downtime side by side. We consistently held a fascination with the supernatural and spectral phenomena. We were convinced every dwelling we entered harbored spirits. We conducted amateur investigations mimicking televised paranormal shows, using a basic mobile device to capture potential audio anomalies. However, there will always be one particular night that stands out to me. One that still affects me to this day. It was around midnight, and we were energetic and wide awake, typical for kids our age on weekends, so we decided to conduct another search for spirits in my house. We got the audio recorder ready, and we secured my father's digital camera to film the proceedings. This proved to be the sole occasion we utilized that particular equipment. The cellar beneath my home was rather unconventional, primarily because the dwelling was quite aged, lending it a distinctly vintage character. Thus, descending the stairs, you entered a primary expansive area serving as storage. Beyond that, a moderately sized chamber housed the laundry appliances. At the very back was a diminutive confined space akin to a small cell which remained unused, primarily due to its unsettling atmosphere that deterred everyone. Sarah and I walked down the steps, activated both the camera and the audio recording device, and started posing the standard inquiries typical of such pursuits. Queries such as, "Is anyone present?" or "provide some indication of your presence" were made. We eventually grew weary of the activity and retreated to my private quarters upstairs, eager with anticipation as we reviewed our initial video capture. This was a significant development, given our strong desire to become paranormal investigators. We watched and felt a degree of letdown upon finding nothing noteworthy in the visual or audio recordings. Ordinarily, we might invent some anomaly like a sound or shadow that wasn't ours to feel less disappointed, but on this occasion our excitement was too palpable, and we didn't even want to fabricate anything. We couldn't sleep, so we engaged in some card games, and then we both agreed to examine the footage once more, suspecting we might have overlooked something. And a realization that proved quite significant. Oh boy, we did. While scrutinizing the recording again, we both perceived a distinct negative aura emanating from the playback. I guess we didn't realize it before because we were overwhelmed by anticipation. We went on anyway. And as we paid more attention, we detected audibly distinct footfalls not belonging to us. Then the image that appeared in the recording is something I still visualize when I shut my eyes. It was the most disturbing visual I had ever encountered. The view was trained on Sarah, and directly behind her a form materialized that resembled a warped, semi-human entity. It possessed intensely glowing pale eyes that created the chilling impression of observing us directly through the screen. At that point, we ceased the playback immediately. We were both utterly stunned. We were unable to inform my sleeping parent, being so early in the morning. We both resolved to keep the discovery private and confidential. Even though we avoided re-entering that lower level altogether, we still discuss it intermittently, and it occasionally appears in our dreams to this day. I remain uncertain if it was mere fantasy or if an entity was genuinely present with us in that cellar. But I maintain my resolve to never descend there once more. This sequence of events unfolded on Halloween during the mid-2010s. I'm Alex, hailing from a small community near different Ohio town name. My attendance was at different high school name, situated roughly a short drive from my residence. Different village name was a generally pleasant small village with mostly decent inhabitants. But an element of undesirable individuals could be encountered if one knew where to search. The most notable location for such encounters was the different park name. Everyone was aware that the state park had an unfortunate reputation for unsettling incidents and disappearances. Now I had visited the park numerous times with peers without incident, so I never gave it much thought. I held many fond recollections of the locale, actually. Like the many times my friends and I cycled along the paths, experimented with small pyrotechnics in the forested areas, or fished in the water. However, advancing to my final year at high school name, specifically on Halloween, my friend Liam and I witnessed a more sinister aspect of park name. The summer before my final year, I had joined the military reserve, necessitating regular physical conditioning to stay fit. So that day, I invited my close friend Liam to accompany me for training on the park paths after school. And he agreed, as he also likes to maintain his fitness when possible. It was probably around late afternoon when I arrived at one of the vehicle areas to await Liam. That's when I observed an older gray sedan occupied by a man with a receding hairline and an unsettling presence, loitering conspicuously in the lot, aware that undesirable individuals sometimes frequented parks. I shot a glance to ascertain his activity, only to realize he was fixated on me, maintaining an unblinking gaze. It was a deeply unnerving look, suggesting predatory interest and causing me significant discomfort. His eyes were wide, and his mouth seemed set in either a grimace or perhaps a slight smile. Our eyes met, and he offered a small nod, seemingly as a greeting, but without relinquishing his intense gaze. I nodded back but averted my gaze due to the palpable discomfort. However, I detected from my periphery that his scrutiny persisted. At that juncture, having reached my limit, I rapidly exited the area. I departed the lot only to notice in my mirror that he was trailing me. This caused me to accelerate sharply, and I raced towards the high school lot, successfully losing him. I contacted Liam explaining my location at the high school and warning him he might encounter this individual alone. A wave of dread washed over me. I received a message from Liam indicating his arrival, so I returned to the location. Sure enough, just as I pulled in, I saw Liam's vehicle, and 2 spots over, the unnerving man in the gray sedan was still observing us. I signaled Liam to follow my vehicle to an alternative parking area at the park, and we made our way over there. We felt secure, or so we initially believed, and exited our cars and descended a small incline to survey the paths before undertaking our run. I prefer not to have objects in my pockets while running, so we started back up the slope when we spotted the older gray sedan repeatedly driving around the lot, seemingly searching for us. From our position on the rise, he evidently couldn't locate us, though we had a clear view of him. We lingered for a short while before ascending, reasoning that 2 individuals in good physical condition could handle one potential threat. As we reached the summit, his vehicle was no longer present. Feeling reasonably secure, Liam and I opted to proceed with the run, but I secured a substantial stick to use for self-defense as a measure of personal reassurance, should we encounter the potential assailant in the forested area. I remain unaware of the man's true purpose, but considering the park's unsavory reputation and his unsettling appearance, his intentions were likely malicious. Presently, I've completed my studies at high school name, serve in a military reserve unit, and attend different university name. On occasion, when I return to my hometown, I sometimes drive around at night and check the state park, curious about who might be there. I carry a bladed tool and maintain my physical fitness, yet the experience still leaves me feeling apprehensive. I anticipate I might face a similar situation again someday. But I'm not foolish. Should I encounter something like that, I will immediately leave the area once again. Therefore, I advise anyone planning camping or hiking trips in state parks to ensure they have some means of protection, practice self-defense awareness, and ideally avoid going by themselves. Adjacent to my sleeping area was a sizable storage recess built into the wall. It lacked a conventional hinged entry point like you would expect. Instead, it was a large panel without handles that could be removed by grasping its sides and simply pulling it free. This story took place a few years back, when I was in my late teens. I recall the initial occurrence. I retired for the night and awoke the next morning to discover the panel ajar, resting against the wooden frame of my bed. This wasn't entirely unprecedented, as it had occasionally shifted before. After all, there were no hinges or fasteners securing it. I slid the panel back into its opening and prepared for the day. The subsequent night I woke abruptly late in the night. I had the distinct impression I'd been roused by a sound. I sat upright, scanning the dim room, and saw the panel was again leaning against the bed frame. Now I was worried that the edges of the recess might be wearing down, preventing the panel from fitting securely as it once did. I allowed it to remain that way overnight before readjusting it in the morning. The next evening I found it difficult to fall asleep. After perhaps an hour or two of tossing and turning, attempting to find sleep, a loud impact startled me, and I immediately recognized the cause. Even in the low light, I could discern the panel falling open once more. My patience had worn thin with this issue. I resolved internally to simply leave it ajar from that point forward. Then I detected a subtle rustle of fabric from within the storage space. My heart instantly began to pound upon hearing this. The room was entirely free of drafts, so it wasn't the wind. With hesitation, I activated the room light and peered into the now open recess. My deepest fear was realized as I glimpsed a figure inside the storage space, observing me in my bed. In a fraction of a second after the light came on, the figure attempted to conceal itself as though unseen. I was paralyzed. The only thing I could manage was to shout for my father. My shout was loud enough to bring my father to my room quickly. I gestured towards the recess, and he examined its interior. Only then, with him present, did I feel secure enough to rise and position myself behind him. My father thoroughly checked the space, even crawling all the way in there, but found no one. He emerged and attempted to reassure me I had simply imagined it, causing me to doubt my own perception. Nonetheless, I was unable to remain in that room. I slept on the floor in my parents' living area, wrapped in a blanket. However, I would hardly call it sleeping, as shortly after I settled down, I heard my bedroom door down the hall creak open, followed by the distinct sound of someone sprinting down the stairs and exiting the front door, slamming it forcefully behind them. My parents heard this commotion, and it was only at that point that they accepted my account. We attempted to pursue the individual, but they had vanished. It was later deduced he must have been concealed within a large bin or box inside the storage area.